everybody. Welcome back to another episode. I have a treat for you today. The triple threat that is Dana Cadwell. She's a wedding planner, venue owner, and educator, and she is busy, busy, busy. So I'm very thankful you took the time to talk with me today. But I'm going to turn it over to you and let you tell everybody about all the amazing things that you do.
Yeah, thank you so much. I am so excited to be here and really talking about a topic that I feel very passionate about. But just to give you a little bit of background, I am not a single business owner. I have a partner who is my sister. And truthfully, the whole reason why I got in this industry was because of her. She has somehow convinces me to do all the things. And she always says that she has the vision and I'm the one that actually makes it happen, which I think is probably true. But our journey really just started this summer before I got married. We were looking for this venue and I just couldn't find anything that fit. And so we were at Bear Rock Cafe, which no longer is around. And we just started chatting and talking. And we were like, oh, it'd be so fun to own a wedding venue. And, I at the time was just like, this is a great, fun conversation, but didn't take it seriously. And we realized we're both scientists. So we both realized we don't have any data to like prove that this could actually be like a thing. And so she said, well, let's be wedding planners. Let's just do some market research. And I was like, haha, yeah, whatever. She's like, no, our friend Megan's getting married. We should like contact her. And I was like, yeah, whatever. Didn't think anything of it. Well, then the next day she was like, so I called Megan and we're officially her wedding planners. And I was like, oh, okay. So this is what we're going to do. Sounds great. And it just kind of evolved from there. And we did planning for about 7 years, 6, 7 years before we really revised this idea of a venue. Realized we were good at planning, loved it, but wanted to get back to the venue space of it. And went through the whole process, bought the land, went through like the rezoning, county stuff, built the venue. And we're celebrating 10 years this fall for the venue, which is crazy to think about. And started doing education right before the pandemic, 2019. And yeah, so here we are. So we do have our hands in a lot of things. I think that we definitely have the entrepreneur spirit of not being able to sit still and continually like evolving and growing. And but it's a wild ride for sure.
Absolutely. And so I think you're the perfect person for the topic that we're going to cover today, which is work-life balance, because you do so much. And I know that you're doing it with your sister, so you're not alone in it, but weddings are very demanding on your time, especially as a planner, I feel like, and a venue, of course, but you're constantly in demand. People are constantly reaching out to you, trying to talk to you. They need to get in touch with you. They need to plan stuff. And then on the vendor side of things too, like it's just constant, do you want to be a part of this shoot? Do you want to come like do this event with us? And time can really get away from you, I feel like, as a wedding vendor. So what would you say? We'll go chronologically. What would you say to somebody who's just getting started in weddings? So maybe like a 20-something in college, fresh out of college, they're like, I want to be in the wedding industry. Work-life balance. What would you say something looks like for someone in that phase of life?
Yeah. So what was really interesting is we started planning, right out of college, and it felt fine. Like, I mean, we both were married. And so there's definitely like that balance of trying to make sure that you spend time with your spouse or whatnot. And it really changed when we had kids. And it's really interesting when I feel like there's hindsight's always 2020. You can look back and say, oh, I wish, or I regret this or regret that. But the real truth of it is when you think about that very beginning stage is the hustle. The hustle's hard, but it's necessary. And there's so many people now, like when I educate people on this work-life balance, and their question they always ask me is, well, would you do it again? And 90% of it, yes, 100%. Because if I didn't hustle hard, if I didn't, give 100% to it, would I be where I am today? And the answer is no. And there is this, and it's really hard because I feel like in the world we live in today, we are really like sold a very false bill of goods. Like you look on social media and you have these people that are like, oh, I have 6 weeks of vacation. I can go here and I can go do this. And like, that's not reality. And that's definitely not reality in the hospitality industry. And so there's this pull that we have where we want to have the freedom to go fly off to Italy, but we also want to have the freedom to grow these big businesses, right? Like they're just two very different things. And so when I talk to people, it's like very much you have to recognize like what is your boundary? Like what is your hard line? I encourage people to make that boundary in the very beginning before they're burnt out. Because if you're burnt out, you're going to have a boundary that's unrealistic and it's not going to work. And before you're in the middle of something, maybe you're not burnt out, but you're like, oh my gosh, I have so much success and I'm doing so great. And so you're pushing that boundary even farther and you're losing sight of a lot of yourself and relationships and whatnot. So when I'm talking to new business owners, say like, what is your boundary? Like, where is your, when you're like, okay, if I was to look back at myself in 6 months and I see myself doing this, I would be like, oh my gosh, who is that person? And why are you doing that? Right. This goes against, how I want to live my life or whatever, and create that boundary. And I think the hard thing is I have people like, well, what do you think it should be? I'm like, well, I don't know what it should be. Like, it's your life, like it's very different for you than it is for me than it was 10 years ago. Right. It's so creating that boundary space. But I think recognizing that it doesn't come easy and it's not just luck and it's not just great connections. Some of that is helpful, but you have to work hard at it. And so when I teach I'm an adjunct professor at a local college and I'm talking to these young women, it's a women's college, and they're telling me, what they want to do. And I'm like, I support you 100%, but you have to recognize that you're going to be in the trenches and it's going to be hard and you're going to regret life choices sometimes, but you have to be willing to do that. You have to be willing to sacrifice a certain part of time, energy, effort to get to the next step because it just doesn't happen. And I feel like, I don't know if you feel that same way. Like you see it on Instagram, like all of a sudden, like, oh, all of a sudden I'm like doing 20 weddings. Like, what? That didn't just happen. Like that wasn't just an overnight thing. Maybe you think it was because they just posted about it, but it took time to get there.
Absolutely. And I remember when I got started in weddings, I mean, it was 10 years ago now, and I was in college at the time. And so I was like, this is great. Like, I was single, I was doing my thing. And then I met my husband, we got married. We were both working full-time jobs while I was working this business on the side. And like, the boundaries conversation was so important for us because it got to the point where like my husband is crying saying, I don't spend any time with you anymore. Like you come home from work and you work on your business and then you're working on the weekends because it's the hospitality industry. And he's like, we have to have time together. You have to do something. And I think that was the first time where I really had to have the boundaries conversation with myself and business and say like, how successful can I be within the bounds of maintaining my like personal life, my marriage, my friendships? And I was working a full-time job that I hated, but I was like, I need to be employed right now. My business isn't sustaining me. So like I have to get smart about these boundaries. And it is really hard. And it can feel like if I set boundaries, I'm not going to be successful. And like there's no way I can do all this. I can't, grow my business unless I'm just putting everything into it, AKA too much into it and just like running myself ragged. And I think that a lot of people find themselves there in the wedding industry in particular, but at most business owners, I think burn out at some point because they haven't set up boundaries. And I think boundaries are really important for longevity. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I would say is that, boundaries are when you hear the word boundary, you think, okay, it means that I'm not going to work on X amount of weddings or I'm not going to do this. And there could be that boundary, but to me, boundaries also time. So there is going to be times when you have to look at something and say, you know what, I do have to hustle the crap out of my job for a year. Because especially for someone like you who's doing a full-time job, all this stuff, and you were saying, okay, look, I know that if I could just like hunker down and like put in the energy and the effort, if I gave myself 12 months, 10 months, 6 months, I could probably get to the point where I could quit that full-time job. What happens is we give ourselves those timelines and we say, hey, I'm just going to like really hustle it hard for 6 months. And at the end of 6 months, I'm going to, figure out how to like either transition full time into this, or I'm going to hire somebody or whatever the case may be. And the problem happens that 6 months comes and it's just a habit at this point. We're like, oh, well, I'm going to hustle for another 6 months. Or, oh, I'm going to hustle for another year. And that boundary is super important to keep. That if you, especially when you're talking to a partner in life, and you say, hey, partner, I really need your support for this next 10 months because these next 10 months, I'm really going to hustle it really hard and it is going to be hard. And here's what I'm going to make sure that we're, just communicating, and so relationship is different for this period of time and having them support you. And I think also like recognizing it and verbalizing is helpful for someone who's in your life to like see the light at the end of the tunnel for them as well. But you have to honor that. So when that 10 months ends, it's not like, oh, I didn't reach that goal that I really wanted. So now I'm going to like do another 10 months, 6 months, whatever. Then at that point, I look at it and say, what didn't work? We need to take a step back. We need to look at what we're doing. And are we hustling in the wrong areas? Did we put all that time and energy into the wrong thing that isn't growing our business? And, take a pause, recoup. And then maybe there's a period of time where it's another 3 or 4 months where you're really hustling hard. But that has been so helpful to me is to create these time bound boundaries. That's like, because I think what's hard if you are a high achiever, right? And you are somebody who really wants to excel, it's hard to look at your partner. And I have a partner like this who is perfectly fine going to 9 to 5 all day, every day, right? He doesn't have the desire and the energy to be an entrepreneur and to like pour his whole life and soul into what he does, right? And it creates great stability for us. And I love that. But he doesn't understand when I was like, I have got to hustle this. Like, I've got to work hard at this. Like, I have to show up X amount of time before. I have to put in the time here, right? Because all they know is this 9 to 5 corporate brain. And so for me to be able to verbalize and say, look, I understand that these next 6 months are going to look like hell. Like, I get it. Like, I get it. And here's what we're going to do. And here's how I'm going to help, make sure that our family stays afloat or whatever. But I need your support in here. And then I promise you that the next 6 months are not going to look like this. And you have to, live up to that promise, not just for them, but for yourself as well.
Yeah, definitely. And weddings, I think, are very seasonal, especially here in North Carolina. That's, things kick off in the spring and then they die down in the fall because winters are cold and ugly and, no one wants to get married, which I totally understand. So, yeah, I mean, and at this point, my husband knows like April through like July is really busy. August is just hot. I always feel like I'm not as busy in
Yeah.
August for some reason. And then like late September and October when the weather's great again, it's very busy. And so, we've kind of worked out our stuff where it's like I'm going to be really busy during these seasons and we do what we can. But yeah, I mean the early days when you're hustling, it's so hard. And I remember when I had finally gotten my business to the point where I was like, I can quit my job. And I was so excited. And I knew for me that step was going to look like I could work part-time, So I found a part-time job as a nanny. And that was a great like transition to make sure that during the down seasons, I was still covering like our part of the family bills. But that season was very short, but this transition from working, hustling, building your business to becoming established, I feel like comes with a whole new set of boundaries as well. And I feel like at that point, it's a little bit more boundaries around your work and how busy you're going to be, how many shoots you're going to be a part of, how much networking you're going to do, and who you want to connect with in the industry. And then again, you're performing at a higher level. So the family boundaries conversation comes back around again. So what advice would you have for someone who would be like mid-career, I would say? They've finally transitioned right into doing this full time, and there's a lot of pressure on them to make it work and to make the money and make it happen. What would you say to someone in that phase of business?
Yeah, I think that's super, super tough. I call it the messy middle. Like you're not like, you don't feel like solid, but you don't feel like you're a baby either, right? So you're kind of in this very messy middle stage. Um, so I think for me, the biggest mistake that I made going when I was in that phase is I had the same mindset then that I did when I started, which when I started, I had a very scarcity mindset, right? Like, so you're getting all the business you can, you're saying yes all the time, you're doing all the open houses, you're going to all the things, you are putting yourself out there to an extreme level because you are scared of not having enough business to propel yourself forward. Now, when you're in this messy middle, a lot of us carry that scarcity mindset with us because we're like, well, it worked here, so why wouldn't it work, now, right? And so I feel like I had a hard time really grasping who my ideal client was. We had a lot of like bad clients because I just said yes too much. I was exhausted because I mean, every month we were doing an open house. I was going to every single association meeting. I was trying to do all these things that I felt like created this success for me before, as opposed to looking at it and saying, that was my hustle period, right? My extreme hustle period. Not saying you don't hustle in the middle, but like that was that. And now like I can look at it and say I have built something where I don't have to prove myself every second of the day. I still have to prove myself, right? There's still moments, right? There's still things. There's still amazing events. There's still, social proof. There's still creating networks and, creating friendships and relationships. But I can be choosy. Like I can say, okay, I mean, I love everybody. I'm like a people person, but there's definitely people that I poured more different people I've poured into that really aligned with my vision of who I wanted my clients to be, right? As opposed to thinking like, oh, I had to be friends with everybody. I can be kind and nice and acquaintances and a great teammate and like show up on the day and be amazing. But who am I going to take out to coffee and go out to lunch and brainstorm and build that relationship with? It's not the 30 people that have asked me, it's the two or three that I know that are going to propel me forward, right? So I think in those middle, that kind of messy middle, it's really looking at not having that scarcity mindset and thinking that like, oh, if I don't do X, it means it's all going to fall apart, right? You have to trust that you've built a foundation that is solid and you can start deciding how and when you want to spend your time. And for us, like our messy middle was very much in the trenches of motherhood too. So, I mean, Courtney had 3 kids, I had 2 kids. I mean, and they were just every year, one of us had a baby basically. So it was like for 5 years, we were pregnant, nursing, all that stuff. And for me, where I have like the deepest seed of regret is really that time period because we had developed a foundation and we were known in the industry. But I could not let go of the mindset that I had before that, like, if I don't say yes, if we don't do this, like, then, we're not going to be asked at this venue and we're not going to get this client. And, it was all this fear of missing out on the business that I didn't put the energy into the things that were really going to create that long lasting business, not that immediate, right? And I missed a lot. I mean, it's one of some of the hardest things I talk about when I, give keynotes. I talk a lot about like literally the years that I miss with my children that you can't get it back. I mean, there's nothing you can do to get that time back. And I think everybody has these moments in life where whether it is a spouse, whether it's a parent or a grandparent or a child or whatever, that, when I think back to it, it's like, it's one of those regrets. It's one of the things, it's a 10% that I do regret genuinely, that I wish I could go back to my younger self and say, this is something that will haunt you for the rest of your life, right? It'll be one of the hardest things you've ever been through. And just recognize that it's not the end all be all, right? There is so much more available for you if you just believed in who you were, believed in what you've built, and not having to have that scarcity mindset of realizing and thinking, I have to say yes all the time. And I think that is the hardest part about the middle, is I think, and I, especially as women, I believe we have a lot of guilt, we have a lot of fear, we have a lot of imposter syndrome. And it's hard to get over that and recognize, I don't know, that you have built something great, and you don't have to fear missing out on something. So that's what I would say. And I say that and it's like, oh, do X, Y, Z. It's so hard. It is so hard. And I failed at it personally. Like personally, I did not do it well or right at all.
Yeah, I do feel like motherhood is just crazy because it demands everything. Like, and I'm a new mom. My baby's 8 months old, my first one. We wait a long time to have kids, so I'm just like this old mom trying to figure it out now. But I just like in the past 8 months, I'm just like, how do people do this? How do people run a business and show it for their kids? And she's 8 months old. Like she's not doing anything yet. She's not in activities. She doesn't go to school. She's just home with me. And I'm still just like, I don't know what this is going to look like in a few years, like what if she wants to play sports or be in dance or something eventually? Like, how am I going to do this and still like run this business? And I think you're right. It's just something you have to figure out over time. And for me personally, I do feel blessed that my business is like it's up and running, it's successful. So like I knew when I had her, I have a system I can actually like pay for people to help me in the business so I can have time back with her. But if you're somebody who's in the messy middle or just getting started and you have children, my heart goes out to you because I don't know how you're doing it, to be honest. It's so hard.
Yeah, it is. I tell this story and it's something I used to be so, so proud of. Like it's and I think that part of it is just that kind of martyr mindset. Um but I had Henry in January of 2012. And I had this client that was getting married 3 weeks later. And I could have passed off the wedding. I could have. I convinced myself I couldn't. I told myself that she would be too upset or that this is too difficult of a setup or XYZ can go wrong or like I'm the business owner, I'm the one that's supposed to be suffering. I shouldn't have anybody else suffer for it. And and I was so proud of it. Like I kind of wore it like this badge of honor. Like, oh my gosh, like, oh, well, I worked a wedding 3 weeks after having a baby. And anyone who's had a baby knows that's a lot, right? That's a lot to put on your body. And I think for me, I was proud of it because I couldn't face the fact of what a bad and wrong decision that was. Like it just was the wrong decision. It was not the right thing to do at all. Um, and I think that there is this mentality, especially with business owners, that we feel like we're the one that has to do it all, or no one can do the job as good as we can. Like we are the ones that have to shoulder the burden. And it really creates a lot of suffering on the other side of it. Like just especially if you're our mom and you have kids or you have just anything, like you're just missing out on friendships, relationships, all that stuff. But it's definitely one of those things where like it is hard to be a parent and to be an entrepreneur. And there are times when you are going to have to make really crappy choices and you're going to have to sacrifice. And like, even now, like I don't make 100% of my kids' stuff. Like I don't see everything because I can't, like, I physically cannot. Like I travel, go speak places. I love what I do. Like I love what I do. Like I'm not going to sacrifice my entire soul and life to my kids. I will sacrifice a lot for them, but I
Mhm.
will not sacrifice me personally and who I am for my children because they're not going to get a great mother at that point. They're going to get someone who's tired, who resents them, who feels unfulfilled, all of that because I have my own specific path, just like you have your own specific path and somebody else has their own specific path. And so when I'm talking to parent entrepreneurs, one of the things I really talk to them about is you have to decide again, when you look back on your life, what's the thing you're going to regret the most? And if you're going to regret missing that baseball game on a Tuesday, then you need to make sure that you're at every single baseball game, right? And you can control those scenarios. Does it mean that your business is going to slow down for a little bit during these times of your life? Probably. But you have to be able to look at yourself in the mirror at the end of the day. You have to be able to look at your kids at the end of the day and feel like you've done the best that you could do, right? And there's a lot of that, like where I've struggled with, I can look at like for Hen, my youngest, like I have like hardly any memories of him before he was 3, like because of how much we were working. We were building to Bradford at the time, and it was just the hardest 3 years of my life. And I don't have those memories, and it bothers me. He doesn't know. I mean, he knows we've talked about it, but he has no like mom wasn't there because like he doesn't have
Yeah.
anything like that. But there's now that he's 12, if I like missed, something that was really important to him, that would be impactful to him, right? And
Mhm.
so there's a lot of conversations that happen. There's a lot of expectation setting. And the kids have a voice. Like so when they know I can't go to everything, but if Henry says, Mom, like this is so important to me, this is something I really want you to be there for, I'll rearrange whatever's going on because that's what's important to me. And so there's just this tug and pull that you have to create and that we play all the time as parents, but it's so important. The thing that I talk about all the time is as entrepreneurs, we struggle recognizing opportunity cost. We can like actually like talk about it and say like, okay, like if I say yes to this, that means I have to say no to this. And we can look at it in terms of business Like if I say yes to this event management on May 3rd of 2025, it means I might have to say no to a full service that is going to bring me more money. Like we understand that logically from a business perspective, but we cannot, and we have a hard time applying it to our personal life. That if I say yes to 35 weddings to work, I'm saying no to a heck of a lot of family stuff, right?
Mhm.
And it's really, and what happens is in the moment we say yes to this thing and then we miss, and we can maybe even say, oh, well, this means if I do this wedding, it means I'm gonna have to miss, family beach weekend and in the moment you're like, that's okay. But you don't really actually think about what the repercussions of that is. You don't, so then when you're at that event and you see the pictures of like your spouse and your kids, because this actually happened, having the time of their life at the beach, I resented the shit out of my job. I hated it. I was like, why am I here? What am I doing? Like, I just want to burn it all down. I want to quit. Like, this is awful. This is terrible. Right. And it works the other way. Like, when I have to go to my kids' band concerts, like, don't judge me, but I hate band concerts, like, with a deep burning passion. They're just not fun, but they play instruments and I go and we clap and they're so glad I'm there. And then I forgot or I didn't realize, oh, I had this like huge opportunity that I missed. Then I feel resentful of being a parent. And
Mhm.
so like this like really a couple of years ago, I started creating and I make a pro con list of like opportunity costs. Like, okay, if I say yes to this, and it really travel, it's more like when I travel, when I go speak places. If I say yes to this, if I say yes to going to like just recently this summer, I'm going to Denver to experience Nace experience. I say yes to this. You know what that means? I won't be able to be there for camp pickup. I've never missed a camp pickup, and I love camp pickup, you know.
Mhm.
But I talked to the kids about it. Like, how would you feel if I wasn't there? And they're like, we don't care. Henry goes, Mom, I just really want you to be there for drop off. I really like having you make sure you're there for camp drop off. He's like, but I don't really have a feeling about pickup. And so I rearranged travel, made sure I was definitely there for drop off and I could miss pickup or whatever. But you have to have those conversations because what happens is that when we don't, we resent the thing that made us miss something else. And it just creates this kind of, you know, terrible resentment cycle, I would say.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of the concept of like if you're doing one thing, you're not doing the other. So if you're doing the business, you're not doing personal life, mom life, friend life. If you're doing friend life, you can't also be working at the same time. And I think you're right. Like it's so hard to think about how am I going to feel a year from now, 6 months from now when I'm booking this work stuff? What's going to be going on in my personal life? That's so hard. And I think as like my daughter gets older, it's going to be we're have to make a lot more of those decisions. But specifically this year, her birthday this year falls on a Saturday, a prime Saturday, and I've blocked it. And I'm just telling
Good.
people
That's
like I'm not
awesome.
working that day. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
And I knew, so I actually had an inquiry for this day for a very high budget wedding, and I was like, "Ooh, this is tempting." We kind of went through the consult process and my heart was just like sinking thinking about it, like not being home for her first birthday, not having like a party on her first birthday day. I don't know. It just wasn't sitting well with me. And so we were going through the consult process. They did not end up booking with me. And I'm glad that they didn't because if they had said, we do want to move forward with you 100%, I would have done it. I would have worked this wedding because it was a great opportunity with a great planner that I like to work with, but they didn't. And it was the hugest sigh of relief. And I was like, okay, now I know I have to block this day. And I do feel like I dodged a
Yeah.
bullet, but you don't know how it feels until it's happened. And your brain is like, we're gonna work this day, which means you're gonna miss her first birthday. And I don't know. Maybe it's silly
Yeah.
because she's one, she doesn't know, but like to me, it was important. And it would have been one of those things I looked back on and would like never forgive myself.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's not silly. It is not silly because it is something that's important to you. And I think it even as there's even in your mind, you can even justify, okay, well, I can do the wedding on Saturday and then we'll just have the party on Sunday. And you're
Mhm.
having this whole conversation. But what's going to happen on Sunday? And we all know working wedding, you are exhausted, right? You are stressed out to the max leading into that wedding. You're not even going to be your best self at that wedding because you're probably thinking about all the party preparations that you have to execute the next day, right? And there's just this feeling of like you're literally split into two places. And so I tell people all the time, like when you are compromising what you know that you do well, like you're compromising because you're mentally not all there, right? So like even if you worked that wedding, you would have not been, I'm sure you would have been amazing, but in your mind, you probably would have felt like didn't do the best that you could do because you were so stressed and worried about and upset about missing this birthday or the fact that you had a party the next day, right? And vice versa. Then the party happens and you're just exhausted, you're tired, you like probably are, grumpy, whatever the case may be. And it's not the day that you wanted because
Hmm.
you had decided to yourself out to the max the day before. And so there's this thing that we make these compromises in our head all the time. And it really ultimately what it does is everyone like we're the ones that suffer because everyone around us, like you're right, your daughter probably wouldn't have known the difference. The client probably would have been happy, but you're the one that is never going to look at that weekend and think fondly of it. You'd be like, oh
Hmm.
my God, that was like the worst weekend I ever had. Like it was so stressful, right?
Yeah. Why did
Which is
I
not
make
what you
that
want.
decision? Why didn't I just set a
Yes.
boundary?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do think the middle's tricky. So let's, in our last like 5 minutes here,
Mhm.
let's hit on people who are established in their business because I feel like this is where boundaries start to feel a little more high stakes in some ways because you're now saying no to like non-ideal clients. You're turning down money. You're keeping your circle small. You're only participating in things that align with your brand values. I feel like you become a little bit more business savvy around your boundaries once you kind of have like an established up and running thing.
Yeah. I would say the biggest thing for me was like I think I said before, recognizing like I am not the only one that can do my job. And I think that when you become an established business, you have to make some decisions. You're either going to say, okay, like I'm going to scale back and I'm only going to take on these perfect ideal clients. And maybe it looks like this many a year, and you can kind of create that boundary that way, right? And that works well for planners in a lot of ways, especially if you're a team of one or you just have mostly part-time people. You're like, hey, I'm just going to do like 10 high-end, kick-ass weddings a year. If we're talking about volume, like the venue and even like our planning company is a very volume-based company, as planners, you have to hire. There's just no other way around it. And you have to recognize that your job at this point is now to be the leader of your company. A lot of the times we get stuck in doing the same thing over and over again that we forget to reinvent ourselves. We forget to pivot. We forget to become like still sort of relatable in the market, right?
Mhm.
And that's when you start seeing businesses really fail. It's because they're just doing the same thing that they've done for the past 10 years. I mean, I can tell you every 3 years there's a new iteration of what we're doing because we have different types of clients, there's different generation coming up, like all of this stuff. And if I would had to execute my events as well as be a leader, as well as think about the business side of it, like I would not be alive. Like I just would not be alive. It's too much. So you have to say, okay, I'm established. Am I the CEO? Am I the one that is creating that vision and making sure everything is going well, or am I the doer? And if you're the doer, that's great. Hire someone to be the CEO.
Mhm.
Hire like we hired a COO here recently, and it's been amazing, right? Because there's still part of me that need to do some doing, and I couldn't be here to be the manager for everybody else. So it's really recognizing what is it that you want to do, what is it that you're good at, and what is it that's going to grow your business in a way that you are okay with that growth and hire. Just that's honestly the whole thing. Otherwise, you're just going to stay in that middle, right? You're never going to be able to get up. And that's okay. The middle's fine for some people, totally fine.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but that's what I would say. Yeah, it just kind of it frees up so much being able to um, give someone else some of those like responsibilities.
It does. It really does. And I think to the point that you were saying, you can kind of choose to go luxury where you kind of remain the brand and like it's only you and you're doing it all, which means you can't do as much, but you're doing it at a higher price point.
Mhm.
Or you can stay more volume. And I think that there is a misconception that you can't run an extremely profitable business in the volume market, and you can, but you
Oh,
cannot do it
100%.
yourself because it's too much time. So
No.
you have to
Yep.
hire. Yeah. So
Got
for
to
me
hire.
personally,
Yep.
this year, well, I've been building out an associate team since like 2019, but this year is my year to like call in the associate teams and like let my couples know like we are a team. I let them know you're going to get me personally or not in our consults for that day. But I mean, it's been the biggest lifesaver. And, having
Yeah.
assistants to help with, some back end stuff, virtual assistants, lifesaver. And,
Yep.
we're running a volume brand and that's
All
just
of
what you
that.
got to do.
Yeah, and it like in C&D, the only C&D bankrolled the Bradford, and it only did that because of volume and volume. Like our event management, it paid the bills. It
Yeah.
absolutely paid the bills. And there is this misconception like, oh, I have to have X amount of full services and partials. I'm like, dude, give me a event management all day long. Like we can crank those out. I love them. It works
Right.
out great. So it's just finding your niche, I think, and then putting yourself in the place that's going to be the most successful in
Yeah.
your business.
Absolutely. Well, this has been such a great conversation. Thank you, thank you, thank you for coming on. Is there anything else that you want to say before we wrap up?
No, I mean, I just feel like the biggest thing is if you are a solopreneur, find your board of directors, find the people that you can call at a drop of a hat who aren't going to judge you, that can help give you sound advice. I think it's really hard doing it alone. I'm grateful that I have a business partner. And just reach out to your community, especially where we are. I mean, it's a great community, it's a great events industry. Just find your people. And I think that helps you kind of stay grounded a little bit more.
Yes, definitely. Well, everybody, this was Dana Cadwell. You can check her out at C&D Events, Anthem House, which is your like luxury planning side. The
Yep.
Bradford is their venue. It's like one of my favorite ones in the area. And Hustle and Gather is their education brand. We're going to link everything in the comments. But yeah, check her out. Let her know.
Yeah.
Say hi. Slide into her DMs and tell her you love
Thank you
this
so
episode.
much. Thank you so much for
We'll
having
see
me. I
you
had a
next
blast today.
time.